Welcome to Ripple Effect Connection. I'm your host, Christy Hugic. Have you ever wondered if all those numbers from your smartwatch, Oura Ring, or continuous glucose monitor actually mean something? Maybe you're tracking your sleep, heart rate variability, or blood sugar, but how do you use that data to move the needle on your health? I've always been fascinated by the power of information. Data tells a story. It shows us pattern, highlights what's working or what's not, and gives us real-time feedback on our body's inner workings. When I first started using health trackers, I'll be honest, I was looking at some very simple metrics: steps, calories, heart rate, hours of sleep, time on my workouts. But things have evolved so much in this space. In today's episode, my good friend and brilliant health coach Megan Rupp and I are breaking down some of the most valuable biometrics you can track and what they reveal about your health, how to actually use them to make meaningful changes. We'll talk about heart rate variability, what it tells you about your nervous system, how to spot patterns in sleep data, why continuous glucose monitoring can be a game changer, and so much more. Rather than a how-to, I want you to consider this more of a real-time conversation between two people who use these elements and why we use them. Because here's the thing, data is only as powerful as what you do with it, and there are times where, guess what? That data can be detrimental. It's true. So let's dive in and learn how to make these numbers work for you. There she is, back in the flesh, Megan Rupp, to help me once again dive into things that you guys just basically what this is all of you getting led into our conversations on the side every single day, right? We talk about these things every single day, right?
Yes. And it's crazy because we'll be like, okay, we're going to talk about this today, you and I. How do we make this better for ourselves? How do we optimize our health? And then we're like, how do we get this on the podcast and help other people like nerd out together?
Yeah, that's the goal. We all nerd out together. So we're just letting you into our nerdy conversations on the side. But today we're diving into something that, depending on how you use it, it can be a huge benefit to your health. And that's looking at biometrics via trackers. We have all these tracking devices that are out there. We're not going to get super in depth with like all that's on the market, which ones are good and which ones aren't. Many of you have knockoffs of some of the, but we're more talking about the actual metrics that are being tracked. One thing I want to caveat this with before we start too is understanding there's margins for error in these metrics when you have these tracking devices, and understanding that it's more important to just see a baseline and know whether your numbers are going up or down. And sometimes those metrics are not precise or exact. So that is something to watch out. I think the first thing we should talk about is the basics, Megan. Why are trackers and looking at biometrics a valuable tool for someone's health journey?
That's such a good question. And I think I'm going to turn this around to what you say, which is test, don't guess. We've said it, you've said it, we learn about it in our education. It's something that is said a lot in our field because we're going to implement things as, health clinicians. We are implementing nutrition practices, supplement practices, stress relieving practices, certain sleep habits. But how do we know if something is working and benefiting our health if we are not tracking in a certain way? So for me, any type of tracking is because I want to optimize my health, but I also want to see what practices I've implemented that are worth keeping in and worth my time, because we don't have all day. We got to figure out, is it going to be the sauna? Is it going to be rebounding? Is it going to be a castor oil pack tonight? Is it going to be red light blocking glasses, like red light glasses? I think the most important thing here is, are practices working, and are actual health metrics improving?
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's an important tool to convince people what maybe we see or know and they don't think is necessarily true. Or like when someone tells you they're not stressed, and then all of a sudden you look at, well, let's just put a tracker on and take a look. And then what do you see? And as I like to say, labs don't lie, trackers don't lie. That's data. That's actual data. So it does help convince it. But there is another side of this. When can trackers be a detrimental addition to your routine?
Yeah, and I think we both need to share here, but you and I have definitely, sent videos back to each other, voice memos where we're, I hate to use the word obsessing, but I know I can speak for myself when I say, I'm like, oh my gosh, my HRV dropped 20 points last night. What did I do? What did I disrupt on my body? We start becoming obsessive with these markers, like you said, that might not even be totally accurate sometimes. And we are analyzing everything, and that in turn causes stress, which actually is going to make my biometrics worse. So for me, I know it's when I'm becoming a little bit too obsessed over something. And I'm using that word for myself, not for all the listeners out there, but if I'm becoming too obsessive with these biometrics and figuring out exactly the nuances that are driving something up or down, that's when I know it might be time to step away from the biometrics and the trackers. But what about yourself? When do you feel like this could be detrimental?
I've seen it a lot where just it's come hell or high water and it just takes someone right down, where it changes their mood or it changes their attitude. I frequently tell the story that when I first came to the clinic, my HRV, which we'll talk about in a second, which is heart rate variability, it was 13, and I can tell you it doesn't matter what tracker you're on, that's not good. Anything near that is really not that good. And I think that it can take you down the tubes like really quickly. Mm-hmm. It can just put some negativity in there and just, why is it going up and down? Why doesn't it stay up and down? Because that's life, but some people are better at handling that and compartmentalizing that than others. So I think you have to know yourself. And if you feel like it's going to be a distraction, or maybe you do it for a little while and then you don't, sometimes it's nice to take it off and put it away for a while and just think about, oh, I can figure out now how I feel. I pretty much know. Like that's, I think, do you think this? Tell me if you think this. Like if tomorrow you use an Oura Ring, I use a Whoop, I think tomorrow, if someone took my Whoop away, I actually now know, I can figure out, I already know when I wake up and the numbers are just confirming it because I now have felt it so often and seen the numbers that now I know what it feels like when I'm getting those numbers. So it's almost like, that's basically what I thought. Do you feel that way too?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I would say I've used the Oura Ring now for 4 years because it was before I was even pregnant with my son. And I actually took my Oura Ring away from myself the first year of his existence on this earth because I knew when I got bad sleep, I didn't need the Oura Ring. It wasn't shaming me. I was shaming myself, but I didn't need the Oura Ring being like, you should try to get more sleep tomorrow. And I'm like, I have a 5-month-old. I would love to, but that's not going to be an option.
Right. All right. No, that's a good point too, especially for a busy mom who already knows they're, super stressed and have a lot going on. So let's get into the actual biometrics now and the things that we are tracking. What's your favorite biometric to track? And, we talked about that you use the Oura Ring to track it. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. And I always like to break this down when I talk to a client, like, biometric. Bio is biology. It's the study of life in living organisms, or in this case, the study of us as humans. Let's really say the bio is us as living organisms. The metric part is measuring data for tracking purposes. So right there, we're literally like tracking ourselves. It's kind of funny. I kind of compare some of these trackers to like a Tamagotchi. If anyone is as old as I am and remembers those little like pets you'd have to keep alive, and it would be like, here's their happiness, here's their food. We are the Tamagotchis now. Like we are literally the Tamagotchis we need to keep alive and make sure we're eating, sleeping, and keeping stress low. So all that to be said, that's where the biometric term comes in. Now, as far as my personal biometric, I like to track sleep because I know sleep is vital for me. There are some people out there that I want to say think that they can live off of poor sleep. I am not one of those people. Sleep is everything from my immune system to my recovery from workouts to hormonal regulation, my nervous system, and I've got a family history of chronic disease that I'm trying to prevent. So my favorite biometric to track is by far sleep, and I utilize the Oura Ring to track it, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. But what about yours? Because I know you've been tracking some biometrics too. What's your favorite? What do you like to track with it?
I mean, I still love HRV. I mean, HRV is heart rate variability. For those who don't know, it's basically the variation in time intervals, between consecutive heartbeats. It's going to measure the autonomic nervous system, which is I like to shorten it to ANS because anything I can make easier. That is like things that kind of bodily functions that happen without force, like heart rate, your heart beating, your breathing, your digestion. These things happen automatically, right? If your HRV is higher, it's going to indicate that you're more adaptable and you're more ready for stress. You're more able to withstand stress. When it's high, when you wake up in the morning, when I say high, that means relative to you. That's also very important because there is no such like, okay, you're 51 years old and your HRV should be this. Yes, someone might tell you here are the averages, but at the end of the day, it's only your baseline that's important and comparing it to you. So if your baseline is in the 40s, okay, so be it. If you suddenly drop into the 30s one night, why did that happen? Did you have a stressful day at work? Did you have alcohol? That does it every time. If you all want to see how alcohol affects the body, take a look at your HRV because you'll see it. And why did it drop? Sometimes, like for me, I started it because I wanted to know how certain workouts, harder workouts were affecting me. Was I recovering? So like for an athlete, someone who's physically fit and you want to know how your recovery is, and that's what like a lot of professional athletes will use these trackers for. They're using it to learn about their body and choosing what they may do that day based on it. So for me, I was using it to dictate my workouts, and I'm still using it, but I started, like I said, with an HRV of 13, and now my baseline seems to be around the 50s. I still will dip into the 60s sometimes. But I'll also dip into the 40s sometimes if I don't get good quality rest. The other one that I love tracking is sleep, like you said, but I like diving into the quality of the sleep. So not only is it really important for me to have 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, but I'm looking at what's tracked as restorative sleep, which means your REM sleep and also, the deep sleep that you're getting, because you need these two different kinds of sleep. You need both to get all the restorative benefits of the rest. So that was a long-winded way to say I'm a kind of a tracker geek, but those are two of my favorites that I really do like.
Yeah, no, I love them. And we could fill multiple episodes up with all the trackers you and I have utilized. So I think our listeners can also appreciate, we will tell you the ones that are going to be very helpful for your goals, but it's bio-individual like everyone else, like you said, from athletic purposes. If your goal is metabolic, hormonal, like recovery, fight or flight system, every client, if they want to get into a tracker, I might recommend a different tracker per client based on their individual goals.
Yeah, 100%. Because I think like I've had the Oura Ring before, and it's not that I didn't like it. I think you have to figure out, do you want it on your finger? Do you want it on your wrist? The ring's really easy to me. Mm-hmm. But for me, I wanted more in-depth data at the time. Now, that's not good for everybody, but I can spit out a report if I want and print it out and give it to my doctor, which I have done before when we were tracking certain metrics. So what about, I'm going to ask you about one on the fly, because there's one out there that I get the most questions about. It's HRV, and then the other one is so the blood oxygen. Do you ever look at your blood oxygen on yours? Do you track that?
I always like to talk about blood oxygen level because it's a very hot topic as well. And, blood oxygen level refers to the percentage of oxygen carried by the red blood cells in the bloodstream. And what that means is there's normal ranges. We could say normal range is about 95 to 100%. However, I will tell you that there's factors that can really affect blood oxygen level. So that's altitude, exercise, respiratory conditions, heart conditions. So the reason that blood oxygen level is nice is because it can be indicative of those chronic diseases or issues that could be bubbling up if all of a sudden your blood oxygen level takes a dip. So I don't want to say blood oxygen level isn't one that I look at every single day, but I kind of just make sure I'm literally breathing. I'm like, oh, blood oxygen, like we're at 95% or higher, like check off the list. I am definitely much more, like you said, an HRV and a sleep girl than anything else.
Let's talk more about the Oura Ring and the biometrics on that. So give me some other things about how it works and just what you see and why you chose to use that one.
Yeah. So the Oura Ring is a smart ring. It tracks health and fitness metrics, sleep, heart rate, activity, and basically you can wear it 24/7. I take it off to lift heavy weights, but that's about it. And that's just because it's not very comfortable. And, there's some dangerous aspects to that. And how it works is it uses this infrared LED to shine light through the skin. And then the Ring's sensors actually analyze changes in the light reflection to measure your heart rate and then other biometrics from that. And then it transmits the data to your smartphone via Bluetooth, and you get a really cool app to use. Personally, I use it for the sleep. It's nice to be able to see like my steps and stress and various things like that too, especially if I don't want to wear my Apple Watch. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. But purposely, I use the Oura Ring specifically for the sleep because it tracks, we think 7 to 9 hours and that's all it is. But that's not all this comes down to. We need deep sleep and REM sleep. The deep sleep is more of that slow wave sleep that is restorative, and it helps us feel rested and energetic. And then there's REM, so rapid eye movement sleep. That's where we dream. And it's with increased brainwave activity, rapid eye movements. And the REM sleep actually helps with memory and emotional processing. So there's a lot more that goes into this, but deep sleep, we want to think more bodily healing. REM sleep is more memory, emotional processing, brain related. So to make sure you're getting all of that, it's almost impossible unless you're tracking it. And I didn't realize personally, and this was pre-kids, this is like before my child was born. I was just, a 20-something-year-old girl working and living my best life. I was like, I sleep 8 to 9 hours a night. My sleep is fabulous. And I got that Oura Ring for my birthday, and my whole world came down on me as I got no deep sleep, no REM. I was also, having glasses of wine with my girlfriend, staying out later, waking up early, hitting up CrossFit and very intense workouts. So the Oura Ring, I have to say, thankfully, was a dawning of it's not just quantity of sleep, it's the quality and the sleep type. And I won't bore our listeners to tears, but it was a full year before I really got the quality of my sleep where it needs to be. And fast forward to today, I get 7 hours a night and my sleep is borderline perfect. I can't say that about every biometric in my life, but I only do about 7.5 hours of sleep because I've optimized to get into that deep sleep and that REM sleep so effectively that I wake up naturally at 5:30 in the morning, like with the sun, ready to go. But that's my journey with the Oura Ring. And there are times where I'll stop it and give it breaks again, especially if I know my sleep is stressed out. But for the most part, it's really helped me to implement very specific sleep hygiene practices that have been life-changing, is what I'll say.
Yeah, and I've been working so hard on the sleep part of things and have had to because I was, waking up in the middle of the night, struggling, I'm obviously hormonally at a different age than you are. So navigating some waters, with that, it had become a little tricky. And I've told the story to a few people about it just got to the point where I was like, okay, I really don't want to take anything to support my sleep. But it was time to take something to support the sleep. It was ridiculous. There was 1.5 to 2 hours of restorative sleep each night. And I'm like, this is not good. It went on for too long. And then, it did improve it. But it is interesting because you can see if I did some grounding, if I did wear my blue light blockers, if I did turn my screens off early, you can kind of see if it paid off or not. So that is a pretty cool thing about it. And then I think there's going to be a lot of people out there that have an Apple Watch. And I know, I had an Apple Watch. So what I would say about the Apple Watch is I don't really use mine for those reasons. I'm not really looking at intense numbers with it. Is my exercise sometimes getting tracked? Am I seeing my steps? Do I like seeing my friends who are, we're friends on there and we can kind of see each other working out on there? Yeah, that's fun. There was an app on Apple that I used to use for my sleep, and it did track REM and deep sleep, and it was pretty good. But it was called Pillow, I believe. It was called Pillow, and I think and I haven't looked at this in a while, so I may or may not be right on this in that it costs $5 for lifetime. But Pillow app was really good, but it cost $5 to get all that data. Yeah. But it was $5 for life. And so I felt like that one was useful. So if you have an Apple Watch, you probably have to go a little bit above and beyond and grab an app right now. But I'm going to tell you, 100%, there's no doubt in my mind that Apple has something cooking, that this is going to become the quintessential tracker. There's no way Apple's not going to continue to venture off into that. So I think if you've got an Apple Watch, I think there's things to come. Some people will use Fitbits, you know, those are
Yeah. Those have been around for a
fine.
while.
I've used them all at some point or another.
Yep. Same.
You know, the marathoners, the runners love the Garmins, and they have a lot of data on those too. And those are really intense. There's a lot of information on Garmins if you're a runner. So there's a lot of different things out there, you know, depending on what you want to track. And then I think something that's a little, I won't say outside the box, but maybe not as common, is a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM. And I've talked about it in other podcasts and talked about some of my experiment. But Megan, you've done that too. So can you talk about a CGM, what it's for, what it does, and maybe some details about your experiment using that?
Yeah. Okay, so CGM, super cool tracker we're getting into. So that is a continuous glucose monitor. So it started off, and it still is technically a medical device, but it started off more predominantly used as a medical device for those with diabetes, because these diabetics have these fluctuating glucose levels, and this CGM will take the glucose level in real time, because you attach it. It's usually to the tricep or sometimes the abdomen area, and it has a continuous tester of your glucose. So if you are a diabetic, either type 1 or type 2, we know that tracking your glucose is vital for those conditions. Now, there's some great forward-thinking people who have decided that it shouldn't just be for those who already have, you know, these diabetic conditions or these glucose fluctuating conditions. It should be for those who maybe have family history, who maybe are overweight or have some comorbidities. And the reason for this is because it provides this detailed picture of these sugar levels in real time, as opposed to the finger prick method where you're pricking after every food, every exercise. These CGMs, since they are continuous and in real time, it can really show your blood sugar and when it is rising, especially not in a good way, when it's rising fast and hard as a response to certain foods, exercise, sleep, or lack thereof. So personally, I actually used one. I know you have too, but I have very specific family history, which I found out that I have the type 2 diabetes genes. I believe they're IRS1 and IRS2. I can fact check that, but it's one that have a little bit of an off center with insulin signal issues. So I am glucose sensitive. So I took the 2 to 3 weeks of wearing, I did levels specifically, and I tracked my glucose with everything I ate, how my sleep went, how stress went. And that was another one. I would say Oura Ring and Level CGM both really changed everything for me. I know you've worn one almost probably more recently than I have, correct?
Yeah, I put them intermittently on depending on what's going on. I will use them when I feel like something might be off, or when I feel like I'm not sure how many carbs to eat, or what, you know.
Yeah.
I like to do it when I feel like something's off and needs tweaking. I think some of the foods, I would tell anybody that anyone could benefit from wearing it for like a month, because you'll get so much information about the foods you are eating and the timing of those foods. I think it is beneficial. I don't think you have to wear it forever. I think once you've done a month and you've eaten like you kind of normally eat, you kind of know what you know, and until something comes along that maybe changes things, you don't really need to go back to it. I think the shocking thing for me was the non-food related spikes you could get were pretty shocking, pretty shocking. Like you could see you were in an intense meeting. You could see like you went to the doctor's office. The one that I had on for that was the most shocking thing I've ever seen in my life was I let a doctor give me a cortisone shot in my wrist. I could not believe what it did on my CGM. It skyrocketed. Wow. And I don't mean just skyrocketed like when I got the shot. I mean like for a day and a half. It was up there. And they will tell you like, well, it's just going in your wrist. It's not. It's going in your blood.
No, your wrist is connected to the rest of your body.
It's in your blood. And if you don't believe me, here's my CGM. Here's my tracker to take a look. It was jarring what it did for cortisone. And I was like, man, I am never doing a cortisone shot again. Multiple reasons why I don't like them, but this was really like sealed the deal. And I think coconut aminos was the other one that was so shocking, is that coconut aminos will send your glucose through the roof.
Yes, yeah. This is such a great topic because it just resonates with bioindividuality. Before I came into the functional health sphere, we'll say, I was in the gym world. I was a personal trainer. I managed a gym and I worked with a lot of bodybuilders. And I will tell you, a lot of them are eating like white rice, potatoes, oats. And we could talk about the quality of those foods and GMOs and all that stuff, but let's just talk about the foods themselves and what they do to our blood sugar. And I remember telling somebody who was one of my clients, like, I really can't eat white rice. And they were like, what do you mean? And I was like, I cannot eat white rice. I know it spikes my blood sugar. And this was before I even used a CGM. I probably didn't even know what a CGM was at the time. I think I was in grad school. And flash forward, years later, I wore a CGM. And I remember I ate white rice and I followed all the rules. I ate the vegetables first. I paired it with a lean protein. And my blood sugar spiked like I ate candy. Like, it was intense. Yeah. And the only way it would come down was if I went for a 20-minute walk in the hills of Pittsburgh at the time, because that's where I lived, and got my heart rate up. And then it came down 30 minutes later. And I was like, I knew it. I was so validated in that moment. But
yeah, it's interesting too. And you mentioned it, like what exercise does, you know,
yes,
how exercise will, take, if it's intense exercise, it's going to take it up. Or like the other one was the sauna blanket. It rises every time we go in the sauna blanket.
Yes.
So every time you're in a sauna.
Yes. And we could talk about this too. It's kind of crazy because we always think, that rising blood sugar is bad, but we can't just make a blanket statement like that. There is some times where rising blood sugar is a good thing. It's controlled and it happens in these acute controlled scenarios, like the sauna blanket. That's an acute stressor that chronically helps us heal. But the CGM is eye-opening. I have told every member of my family that they should wear one for about a month as well. And, people don't believe us, but the proof is in the data that can just help you long term.
And I think it can be a little bit detrimental. And I think there's a little bit of I'll say just a fear of the spikes.
Mm-hmm.
We've all of a sudden created it like we got a flat line. I mean, it's normal to have a spike when you eat. Like, this is not like, we don't want a roller coaster, but like, I just feel like we're also getting a little bit closer to a world of like where we're a little bit overboard with this, where it's like every spike is demonized and it's like the end of the world. And I would say, honestly, of all the trackers I've worn, that one had the most effect on me mentally, where I was like, what the heck? I just ate X, Y, and Z. Why is my glucose spiking? Like, honestly, it would change my mood. So like, if we're talking about it being detrimental, like, that was one I felt like at times it could be detrimental, even though we got a lot of good information from it,
Yeah, I remember when you were wearing it and it was like things were setting it off. And that's another thing. Stress affects blood sugar. So yes, you're seeing in real time the food, the acute stressors. But if it's the CGM's driving more stress, is that a true, accurate depiction of your glucose throughout the day? No, it is not, because stress is affecting it. And again, there are times where we need our glucose to rise, and there's some benefits to glucose rising. And there's some benefits from, muscular hypertrophy, so building up muscle. There's some benefits with our hormones and regulating and forming hormones. It's not a black or white scenario. We need glucose, but like you said, it's when it's the roller coaster that's when we need to make some changes. Big time.
Your body needs energy, right? And it's this is the way of getting the energy, it's you're running a long event or marathon. What do they have you eat? They're usually having you eat something sweet, right? Because they want that glucose to come to the rescue when you're doing that. So I think the last thing that we're going to touch on quickly is the biometric scale, which is a nice little tool, really. A really nice little tool that can really let you know not only how much you weigh. Again, I would tell you, I don't think you're going to find one that's 100% accurate. It's just whatever your numbers are when you start and you have your baseline, You're going off those. Is that number going down? Is it going up? I don't know that the body fat percentage is accurate. That's not going to be as accurate as calipers and things like that. But what are some of the other metrics on those biometric scales that can be valuable for people?
Yeah. So, and these things are incredible. Like you said, there's smaller scales and there's larger scales. The ones that you could buy for 50 to $100 off Amazon, they're usually labeled as a bioelectrical scale or a bioimpedance scale. And it uses a tiny electrical impulse that runs as a current from your toes to your head. And, it's very, very small. You can't feel it. But what it does is it encounters different levels of resistance from different tissues. So your fat, your water, your muscle, your total body weight, it's going to be able to show a lot of that. Fat, visceral fat around the organs, total body water, skeletal muscle mass. It really helps with body composition and distinguishing between fat, muscle, and body water. Now, again, I will say the $30, $50 scale you buy on Amazon, it may not show those 1 or 2% differences. Like it could take a while. There's one that we used to use in the gym world called an in-body scan. Those are pretty cool. Those are a lot more accurate, but ultimately, like you said, there's more error rates to the one that you're going to have in your own home, but you can compare oranges to oranges. So if I am 30% body fat today, and then in a month from now, I am 29% body fat. Well, is it the exact number that I think is related to me? I don't know. I really don't know. But is it showing the trend in the direction I want to go? Sure. So that's where it could be beneficial as long as we remember that there are limitations, especially if you're stepping at it at different times of the day and if you're hydrated or dehydrated, since it does require the water in your body to measure it. But those things are cool. I have one. I just, take it with a grain of salt some days, especially if you're dehydrated.
Dr. Cabral did a really, really good podcast about weighing yourself with the hydration and not hydrated. Maybe I'll link it up because it was so good.
Yes.
And I was like, gosh, I never thought about this.
Yes.
But
it's huge.
It is huge, and it makes a difference. It actually could tell you how dehydrated you are, actually, very much.
Yeah.
So like in the morning, we weigh less because we're usually, some of that is because we're dehydrated.
Yep. And then you brought up alcohol with the sleep tracker, but I would be remiss if I didn't bring it up that, we used to use these again in grad school. And in grad school, there was a lot of late study nights and then going to the bar and drinking. And we would step on the bioelectrical impedance scale the next day and we'd all be like, wow, we're all so skinny after a night of drinking. No, we were dehydrated. From the alcohol. It was like we were, young and 20. It's just what you do. But yeah, so if you're dehydrated consistently, it's going to show up lower. If you're overly hydrated, that could show up differently as well. So I need to listen to that episode. You definitely need to link that.
It was really, it was really interesting. I love his podcast too because he's able to keep them short because that's what he does. It's amazing. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's a valuable tool, and I would say, just understanding, my carrying extra water weight is the your BMR, your basal metabolic rate. You can see that. I noticed on that, again, I don't know if it's 100% accurate, but the more I was picking up my exercise, the higher it was going. It was going up with that.
Yep.
Muscle mass. If you really want an accurate thing, there is a DEXA scan that you could, that you can do. My chiropractor has one in his office. I don't know how much they usually charge. I know he charges like $100 to do it, and it's really very beneficial to at least do that sometimes, because it is important to know that visceral fat. You don't want that fat around your organs. That's when things, visceral fat's not good. So that is something that's important to know. So I would always recommend to someone like doing that once, to check that out. So that's it. Did we forget anything?
No, I love that you rounded that out with the DEXA, because I know at the time of my education, that was the gold standard. Yeah. I think it still is today. So I love that because, yes, bioelectrical impedance scale, wonderful, high error rate, DEXA, gold standard. You could even do both and compare them.
I was just about to say that. It'd be great to do the DEXA and then get on your bioimpedance scale and then see what the numbers are, and then you kind of know the difference a little bit there, and you know kind of how to compare them. There's one other thing that I forgot to put in earlier that I think is an important metric and a simple one to measure. It's heart rate. Yeah, it's really heart rate, right? Because heart rate will show when things like, if I'm eating something that maybe I ate late, maybe I eat something that I don't normally eat. Maybe it's like a sugary something late in the day. You're sick. You will see that in your respiratory rate. Those things is like when we first got the Whoop on the PGA Tour, when I'm covering golf, the Whoop was out in the PGA Tour when COVID was out. And they were actually able, and the NBA, I think, used the Oura Ring, and the PGA Tour players were using the Whoop. They were seeing people were getting COVID before they got COVID because they would see those numbers drop. And you will, when you get sick, like I remember when I had COVID and I saw you will see it. I saw it coming and I was like, oh God, here we go. So that was another one I left out, and I know it's out of order, but I didn't want to leave that out of the podcast, that those are two metrics that are just simple things that are really good to track. And you can track your heart rate on your Apple Watch. You know, you have a heart rate thing, you hit it and it will tell you what that heart rate is. So you can just double check and make sure, because lower resting heart rate is always going to be a benefit in health. Not too low, but lower resting heart rate.
Yeah. That's going to show it's like you're more efficient in your heart function, better cardiovascular fitness. So a lot of times clients would come to me and say, you know, my resting heart rate went down to the 50s. Is that a bad thing? And I'm like, no, you're working out and eating healthier now. That's indicative of good health. If you change nothing and all of a sudden your resting heart rate's dropping, go see your doctor.
Yes, that's
Full
true.
disclosure.
Don't call us when that stuff happens. That is a Western medicine problem. No doubt about it. So, all right. Well, I'm sure there's going to be more news coming out in the tracker world and with these metrics. So we'll be sure to keep everyone updated. But hopefully that gave you all a guideline of kind of things to look at. And Megan, thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, can't wait till next time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, feel free to connect with any of us on social media and let us know what resonated with you. Full show notes can be found at christyhugic.com/podcast. Please take a second to like, follow, review, and share this podcast with anyone who might benefit. And if you can leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts, it really helps me bring more amazing guests your way. Stay tuned for the next episode of Ripple Effect Connection. Let's create waves of change together.